Welcome to Bandit's Keep. I'm Daniel. This week I want to talk a little bit about high-level play in D&D. Old school D&D, a little bit new school D&D, a bit here too, and the idea of like what we can do to keep the game fresh and interesting. I've got a couple of areas I'm going to break this down into, but first I kind of wanted to give a bit of an overview. So what can happen, especially if you're playing more of like an epic kind of fantasy game, is that you start off and you've got this idea for this campaign and okay, so there's this lich, and they're going to take over the kingdom, and they're going to do all these things. They have these spells brewing, and they have these minions. And you set this thing up, and you play through till 3rd, 4th level, and finally the player characters defeat this evil thing. They save the kingdom, and everything's wonderful. And now they're 4th level, and where do you go from there? Do we fight the next level up lich, right, to save the next bigger kingdom? And I think part of this problem, of course, and then imagine at 8th level, after you beat Lich number 2, now, it's like you just keep building up. So this idea that like, you just keep scaling the same thing. So where you fought the Lich the first time, they had 50 hit points. Now you're fighting Super Lich, they have 100. Then you're fighting Lich with 400 hit points. While that can be fun because it allows you to use various abilities and stuff of your characters, you're kind of playing the same game over and over again. And I think that what we can do at high levels is allow D&D to shift and change into different games. So here I'm going to kind of present two ways this can go. One is what's commonly called domain play. That is to say that the player characters become barons or rulers of a church or a cult. Magic users have towers with apprentices and small armies, and things become a little bit more abstracted. The other way is that the characters keep adventuring, and instead of being their own kind of barons, they help save the kingdom. Kind of the thing we talked about at the beginning. But if you're going to use that as your standard, that is, you have players that aren't interested in the domain endgame, we have to reconsider how we start our campaign. All right, so let's start with domain. So in a domain play kind of end game, so if we look at something like original Dungeons & Dragons or even Basic Expert, they have rules in here for this, where at a certain level, your characters are kind of expected to start strongholds or open strongholds, build strongholds, maybe is a better way to say it, and develop followers and armies and stuff like that. Where BX doesn't get into war game rules, like how you actually do battles and stuff, if you go back the companion set has that stuff. But if we look at OD&D or we look around a little bit on the internet, we can find rules for such things. Many people will say that when they kind of get to this level in a basic kind of game, or even AD&D type of game, they'll just retire the characters, right? They've got their gold, they build their castle, they become effectively an NPC or a story in the world. Sometimes campaigns will jump forward years, sometimes you'll be in a different section, or sometimes the character will be taken over by the DM, right? You can do that. But in more of a traditional domain setup, you would basically take these characters and start to run them playing effectively a different game. Now you've got your castle, you're protecting lands, there's income that comes from these lands, mines and manufacturing and farming, could be all kinds of things, trade, and, things happen. And basically you are maneuvering on the grander scale forces around to handle various problems. Now, some of these forces might be other groups of lower level player characters that you're all playing at the table, right? So you can you've got this like various levels of things going on. You've got this like on the top level, and then you've got down on the dirt level, possibly in the same world, ideally in this case, so that you can still do it, right? Okay, there's been raids from what is believed to be a werewolf over here in this farming village. So we're going to hire or get together a group of adventurers to go handle it. So of course we use our other player characters to do that, right? We're not going to send our 10th level fighter to fight those werewolves because they're in the middle of something else. They're negotiating politics and various things like that. Now, that's not to say that these high-level adventurers don't occasionally come forth, maybe in a massive battle running an army, or maybe as an adventurer because they just want to get back into it, right? We've got one of the very classic early Conan stories, which was based on a Cull story, was Conan as the king, right? And then kind of bored. And there was like a problem and he kind of had to go handle it. So you can definitely do that, right? You can do this idea that you are kind of semi-retired, you're running this domain, but every once in a while you go out there and have a bit of adventure. Maybe there's a a treasure map that's been uncovered and it looks too dangerous or you want that item. So you can bring these characters back out. But basically, as far as they're being used in the campaign world, they're being used more as overhead. Now, I think that most people don't want to just change their game and go, hey, we've been playing D&D for a year and a half with these characters adventuring. Let's now switch and play a war game and diplomacy. Like, I don't think most people's tables switch like that. I think, as I alluded to earlier, what you do is you play this in addition to the other game. So you're bringing up another group of characters or multiple groups of characters even at different levels, doing various types of adventures that you enjoy. And those players that enjoy this domain part can run their characters in this way. A good way to handle something like this, if you're like me and you can only play maybe once or twice a week, so you're not able to just put your whole life into it all the time, is you can handle some of these domain level things via Discord servers or chats and things like that, right? So you can basically handle a lot of it in what they call play by post. Things are on a larger scale. They're happening month to month. There's actually rule sets. And let me know in the comments below if you want me to go over a few of the rule sets that are designed strictly for domain play. There's some really cool ones out there. And you can basically run this separate game in addition to your regular campaign. But I want to put this out there. Traditionally, because the book says, right, you can become a baron when you get name level, or you get followers when you get to patriarch, matriarch level. A lot of people think that, well, we just adventure in the dungeons and all of a sudden we get name level and we step out in the world and we're like, ta-da. You don't have to do it that way, right? You can build a castle, take over a tower, get a Thieves Guild going at a lower level. You just won't necessarily get the benefits of it, right? The benefits like being a baron. That is to say that if the rules say at 9th level as a fighter, you get followers and you get a certain percentage of taxes because you're granted this much land. Well, you could have had your keep there the whole time paying your own taxes and, doing these other things until you reach that level. Then you get, it becomes part of the world where you become that baron. I recommend if you have players that are interested in this domain type thing, you let them right away start to get something. Maybe something small at first, maybe a ship, right? Not that a ship's that small, but a ship or a small band of mercenaries or possibly a tavern or just some kind of house that they can build or move into and start their adventurers guild there, right? Take over an inn, right? You don't have to run it day to day. You don't change the game into, hey, we're going to run an inn, but the characters invest their gold. It goes on in the background. You don't have to worry too much about it, but it's some stake they have in the world that you can use as a central hub. This gets them used to acting in the world in that way. One final thing I'll say here is that this type of campaign works best in what I'm going to call a Borderlands type campaign. That is the idea that you've got a handful of small towns kind of out there in the edge of the wilderness, the unknown, where owlbears roam free and dragons are flying through the sky. And PCs are setting their stakes, right? And as they go through areas and make them more safe for civilization to thrive, that's where they set up their castles, right? That's how we're able to have these domains. If you're playing in a place that's really more established, which we'll talk about in a second, this becomes a little bit trickier because then it becomes more political on that level where you have to take over a castle that's already there, and maybe that's a little bit of a different game. On the other end of this, we have what is, I think, kind of what ends up happening with a lot of tables, but they do the thing that I talked about at the beginning where it's just like, you've done this, now we're just going to do it again with tougher monsters. And that is to be like heroes and protectors of the realm, but not necessarily controllers of it. This type of campaign works best in a world that's a little bit more settled. That is, there's a king or there's dukes, there's larger cities. Things are a little bit more established, right? These towns that you go into where there's a blacksmith and a thing, and this, fully not these towns you walk into and it's like, well, yeah, you can sleep in the barn, right? It's a different kind of world, a world that's a little bit more established, a world where there are orders of maybe adventurers guilds and things like that going on. The world is basically there. What the characters can do here is work their way up, doing whatever they're doing, going through dungeons, whatever. But what we want to do, and I talk about this a lot in my sandbox references, is make sure that every single lead that they follow is not to save the world. Let the characters do things on a smaller scale in the beginning to get in with towns, to get in with heads of towns, to get in with councils, to get in with small parts of the kingdom, to get in with barons, to get in with dukes. That way, by the time they get to the higher levels, they are now the type of party that might be called upon or might just be sent information about certain things that the kingdom needs done, right? That way, when you're at your 9th, 10th level, you are getting into this world saving. You're not doing it at 4th level. You're not doing it to get closer to that domain level. This is where you're going out to fight the big dragons, not like a little dragon that's flying around, but the big ancient dragon that's going to be a massive fight, the one that can take out an entire army by themselves, but a small group of elite adventurers can go in there and possibly defeat this dragon. Those are the tasks you're going to do. You're going to step through portals and plane jump. You're going to sail to other countries and fight massive giants, right, to collect items that are needed for the kingdom or for yourselves. But basically, you're going to do these tasks that are above and beyond. And the reason why I say, you hear me mention plane jump and traveling, is because one thing that breaks the immersion for me on these kind of campaigns is, where were these bad guys before, right? If there's Lich 1, then Lich 2, then Lich 3, would Lich 2 wait until Lich 1 was dead before they started doing anything? That's how sometimes these things feel. It's like you're traveling down the road at level 1 and you fight a bunch of orcs. Then 3 levels later, all of a sudden they're ogres, and then they're trolls, and then they're hill giants. But why? Where were the hill giants before, right? Why is it that these things weren't there before? So by having your world set up so that you've got this like controlled kind of safe place, if you will, and then there are incursions that happen that the player characters have to go out into the wilderness to meet. And because they're powerful, they're able to, they're called upon to do it. And again, it's not like they don't have to do the quest giver thing. It's not a thing I do a lot, but you can just make it be known that they're out there, and they'll realize at a certain level, oh, we actually have the power and influence to handle this, right? This dragon is moving closer and closer, to civilization every year. Well, we're at the level now where we can face it. And by defeating that dragon, we might get the thing we want: gold, magic items, glory, whatever, right? I mean, whatever it might be, that's what we're going to get. So a few kind of final thoughts on this. Again, going back to it, we have to think about our threats. In both cases, we want to start with threats that are smaller. Don't start with the idea that you're going to do this campaign levels 1 to 20, and in the end, they're going to defeat a demigod. Create smaller pockets of adventure and see where your players take it. See if they seem to latch on to the domain thing. Do they want to buy a ship? Do they want to get a tower that becomes available? Or do they just want to keep adventuring? And consider how you're going to adjust that. If you started with a Borderlands type place, but it seems like you've got more Heroes of the Realm type players, maybe figure out some hooks that will get them closer to the more civilized lands where they can make connections to do those kinds of adventures. In both types of games, you could do jumps in time, but I find the more domain ones are where during those jumps, you're still going to want to be doing more kind of actual play, if that makes sense. So if you're going to jump forward 6 months in a narrative Heroes of the Realm campaign, that's 10 minutes around the table discussing what's everybody been doing, maybe making a couple of rolls if they were crafting or learning spells. If you're doing a domain, you're going to play out 2 sessions about what happened, things moving around, battles that happen. And if you have players that aren't interested in doing that, you could do it solo. You could do it with another group of players, which is a fun way to do it. Or you could do it with just 1 or 2 of the players that are interested in that. But you want to kind of play that out a little more, because in the domain, like own the domain type of play, I feel like you want the dice to do a lot of talking. As always, I would be really curious what you guys do. Do you play the domains with running castles and stuff? Have you ever done war games? Have you ever gotten to the point where that happens? Or do you just keep playing your characters until they become so powerful that they can do all kinds of plan or travel? Or do you kill the campaigns early because you don't feel like either one of these 2 things would work for you? And if so, why? I'd be curious. We hear a lot of people talking about this online, where when they play these classic games, a lot of them stop around 5th, 6th level because they feel like they've kind of done what they need to do. Are you one of those people? Let me know in the comments below. Also, check out the description. Down there, you're going to find a link to my Discord server. Lots of great people over there discussing all kinds of topics like this one. And you'll find a link to my Patreon if you'd like to support the channel. I'll talk to you soon.